Hey, what's up, Liron here. If you're struggling with watercolor painting, let's take the next about 10 minutes just to relax and paint what I think is one of the easiest versions of watercolor boats you can paint. I'm going to share with you my sketches as well in the description box below. Feel free to paint along with me. Now, I'm starting with a very simple drawing here. We're focused on the main shapes, the large shapes that I'm seeing. So if it's the side of the boat, if it's the inside of the boat, and what I'm looking for is where the value and colors change. So where a shape becomes lighter or darker, where a color goes from red to blue. That's what I use to know where to draw my lines. Now with boats, it's actually deceptively easy to make a very inaccurate sketch, but that's fine. If you paint over it with something that looks solid, that looks good, it will still look good. The main thing here is this little tarp layer there up top, the white at the front, and the side that's going to be in the shadow. I have a bit of dirt from erasing, but that's fine. We're going to establish the reflections and shadows as well, which is very interesting. It's always a fun thing to look at with boats, and I think this in general is a wonderful subject just to practice fun, loose watercolors. So I'm going to use a strong version of my red. There's a strong red for the entire body of the boat from left to right, and the left side is very, very dark. So we're going to carry this layer all the way to the right. We're going to continue painting and using very vibrant colors. The only thing I'm painting around is that buoy. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly. And I want to keep the color very pure here because this is the part that's in the light. The part to the left, though, is in the shadow. And you're going to see I'm going to mix a bit of a dark here, a strong dark. And I'm going to include some of my red within that dark, too, so that it feels like a part of it. People always say don't use black when painting. It's rubbish. You can do whatever you want as long as you hit the color accurately. Now I'm injecting a bit of that black into that shape, and you'll notice it moves because everything is wet. That's good for me because I'm looking for that smooth transition. So if you can just use a bit of black on that left side of the boat's body, and let it move. See what it does. Now, if you're a beginner, you'll get the timing off. Things will look a little strange, and that is fine. But just know you can touch the edge carefully, see how much it moves, and then decide how much you want to expand it. Now, I mixed a bit of a warm, neutral mix there. It's neutral because it's warm, it's a yellow, but the yellow is mixed with other colors too. The right side that is closer to the light, I'm using a cleaner yellow, but the left side, notice, is a little more gray. And I'm leaving a white gap there for the edge of the boat. And that's quite important here, as you'll see. Now let's start working on the water and the details there. The water is going to frame the entire boat and make it look really cool. And especially because when you look at greens and blues, they contrast really well with the red. Green is red, the red's complementary color, opposite on the color wheel, so it always looks good together. I'm a big fan of having yellow, red, and blue in my paintings too, so that's another thing I wanted to include here. Now, I put in that cast shadow of the boat. There's a shadow and then there's a reflection, and the two are not to be confused. So now we're getting onto the reflection and water. The reflection looks a little different from the shadow. The shadow is just a darker version of the water. The reflection, however, shows the boat in it. So we're going to have this red that you're seeing right here as part of a reflection. Of course, the red is more muted and neutral because it's a reflection. The water kind of changes and shifts it a bit, so it's not going to be as vibrant as the red up top. And of course, I'm leaving this lighter area for the reflection of the buoy. It looks so good. I love the way this looks right now. And you'll notice I have the most important ingredient to watercolor, which is flow. The water flows, and I have some loose edges, some areas where the paint mixed very naturally and created these cool little effects of, the strange pattern in which two forms mix together, which I absolutely love. Now I'm mixing a cleaner, more pure blue, mostly with this phthalo blue, okay, because I want the water to be really rich. It's still light, but it's a rich blue that's gonna contrast with the shadow, right, and the reflection. And once I frame the boat with this blue, look at how it gives it more meaning. It gives the white on the front more meaning. It gives the highlights more meaning, and it gives the shadows more meaning. And it just makes everything connect really well together. And again, I love this mix of some loose edges as they're going to be formed there with the warm red and the blue, and some hard edges, you know, where we stopped our shapes, so to speak. I'm a big fan of that. Now I'm taking my rigger brush. This is just good for getting thin lines, and I'm gonna start throwing in some details as you can see them. Lots of ropes mainly, and the bars holding them. So a lot of different small details that are gonna. What I find the details are, they anchor your painting or your sketch. In this example, it's a quick painting. You could call it a sketch. They anchor it, so they give you something to focus on. In the beginning, you have a lot of colors and shapes, and I'm a big fan of, you know, getting punchy shapes. I want to see the shapes and to have them have meaning, but sometimes we paint very loosely in watercolor, and then these little lines and details come in and they anchor us, and they give the viewer something to look at and to focus on. And I think this is one of the simplest boats you can paint. It's okay if you got it wrong. It's okay if your colors mixed in an awkward way. What I'm looking for here is, can I tell the difference? Are there a few distinct shapes? So is the red, can I separate that from the white up top and from the yellow? As long as I can do that, that's fine. Now I'm adding a few lines here. This is structural. The structure of the body of the boat has these steps to it, and they go at a bit of a diagonal angle. So just throwing these in there, letting it go, will give it a more believable feeling. You can start adding reflections too, but I didn't even go that far. To me, the simple boat is just perfect. Now let's do another one. This one is more of a full scene, so we're going to have two boats, but they're going to be quite simple. So once again, the painting can be a little... it can be a bit of an illusion, and it's okay if you get your lines inaccurate, but you'll notice how some lines are differently angled than the others. It's a very common thing. Some lines are more horizontal and more vertical than you would think. And that's something to pay attention to. And actually, you can place your hand over the screen or the painting if it's printed and look at the lines and figure out, are they vertical? Are they horizontal? What kind of angle do they have? And sometimes it's very misleading, but wow, this line is actually vertical, almost like the tip, the edge of the boat has a curve that's so gentle and so mild. It's very common to miss it, but it's fine. The paint can come then later and do the job for you. So we're painting two of these boats. As you can see, I love the combination of blues and yellows, cools and warms in this scene. You can also see some of the ocean and then some of the sandy beach, which just looks really, really good together. Now I'm starting with the boat that's closest to us. So I'm going to paint the inside of the boat while simply skipping the highlight. So where people sit, that's a highlight. I'm skipping that. I'm painting around it. There's also an oar, I think. Is that how it's called? Oar or a row? I'm not sure, that I'm painting around, right? I'm leaving these to be white highlights. And these white highlights are going to be a wonderful... kind of focal point, right? Because you get a strong contrast there with the lights and darks. And I'm going to do some wet and dark in some areas in a couple of moments. Now the front is a little darker, so here we go with a little darker. I have this cool trick for you. I'm using my phthalo blue because I ran out of French ultramarine. If I add a bit of quinacridone rose to it, the phthalo blue looks more ultramarine-y. That's how it works, because ultramarine is a little more red. It's a little warmer. The front of the boat, once again, is a little darker, and we get to the body. Now the body is really cool. The top part is blue, and underneath it is a worm. Now, this worm, is it really a worm? It's kind of a gray, right? And some of it could be white, and it's reflections from the sand. It could be many different things. This is where optical illusions come into play. A color may look warm simply because it's surrounded by cool colors, and vice versa. To us, it doesn't matter, though. These are expressive boats. You can change the colors if you want. You can go ahead and paint that red. You can paint it green, whatever colors you want. What's cool about boats is you have this strong contrast, right? And this is the shadow going there. You have a strong stripe of red or a strong stripe of blue, and it looks good no matter what color you use. Now, I use the dark here right next to the bottom of the boat. I want these two to mix, so that yellowy, neutral, muted yellow mixes with my dark color. And now I'm bringing in a bit more blue, because the shadows feel cool, even though it's on a warm sand, right? Now, this brings me to another point. A lot of people are scared to paint light over dark, to start with the darks. I started with darks here. I started with shadows, and I'm going to paint the sand on top of them. And this is the perfect way to show you it's okay to do it this way. It's okay to work this way. It will work. It will look good. Okay, because a lot of people are scared of that. They worry that the paint's going to move ever. If you're using good quality paper, it won't. If you're using terrible paper, It's okay. Paint in one go. Don't do it the way I do it. Paint around the shapes. You'll see. Now I'm using a bit of warm here because I see it on the edge of the boat's body. I don't know, it looks so good with the blue as well, so might as well use it. Maybe it's white that reflects the warm sand. Could be many things. Now, time for some wet and wet. I just want to bring out, and I need more paint and more water there. That's why it wasn't working. Will sometimes happen. More paint, more water. Now I'm going to do wet and wet, and it's going to work. Just to give the indication of the structure of the boat, right? Because it has the engine, for example, is darker. So I'm just going over it, and wherever I see darks, I'm placing them in. The timing on that can be challenging, right? So you can practice this in isolation. Just put a shape, wait for it to dry just a bit, and then see if you can achieve that same effect. Come back with thicker paint and see if you can make the paint do a shape on top of the shape that lasts, that doesn't spread out too much. Now the other boat is quite simple, just a small highlight with a blue, and then the coolest part I think of this painting is that strong contrast with the yellow, because the body of the boat here is actually yellow. It's not the sand reflecting, it's not a gray that's been warmed up by the environment. This is actually a yellow. So I'm mixing a strong yellow with my reds because it's a bit of a warmer yellow. And I'm placing it and allowing it to touch the blue. Another thing a lot of people are scared of, letting two colors touch together, is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. It can look spectacular. The paints are going to mix together, but guess what? That's the beauty of watercolor. And again, the control for that is something you can work on in isolation. You may find that everything moves really badly. It spreads out. I think the mistake most people make if it all mixes too much is they use too wet of paint. And it's very easy to just use very watery paint. You'll look at the colors on my palette. At times, they look really strong, really thick. And for shapes to last, kind of mix together where they touch, but to not lose their own sovereignty, if you will, they need to be a little thicker. The wetter you use, the more movement you're going to get, the wetter the paint is. Just something to be aware of. Now I'm mixing in these darks just to place in a few areas where the boat is dark or light. Kind of comes from the front top left a bit, so the shadows cast towards us. The area that we just painted is against the light. The light doesn't get there. Now, a bit of blue, neutral but blue. And I'm doing it on purpose. I'm leaving some sprinkles of light on paper. It's an effect. It takes maybe a moment to get, but once you get it, it looks really good. Use the side of the brush. Drag it over the paper, especially cold press, rough paper. It's going to be hard to do on hot press paper. You need paper with texture. And you're just leaving dots of light. And it's going to look wonderful and make a lot of sense once we, guess what? Paint the sand in. So there's a gap between the blue and the sand. By the way, I don't know if you noticed it in the photo, it goes a little light, and it's perfect for us because that way we also won't get a green. This is something I often do. I'll leave a gap of a watery area between the blue and yellow when I need to, and that way I don't get a green. Green with water and oceans it's okay. Actually, it sometimes looks really good, but with skies, it doesn't look very good. So here's another cool little tidbit for you. Leave that white gap, and it will look fantastic. Now notice how as soon as we put in the sand, all of the highlights on the sea and on the boats make sense. Look at how the white on the boat that's closest to us, it makes sense. It looks so much better. And notice how I'm painting right next to and sometimes over the shadows. Existing shadows, I don't care. You're going to see in a second. I'm painting over them and it's fine. Nothing happened. No disaster. Look at how good this looks, right? And this is to be the simplest boats you can paint in watercolor. You can go ahead online, look for a bunch of pictures like this one. It's wonderful. It's great fun. You can be very expressive with the colors. I hope that gives you something to work with. Feel free to watch again and paint along with me. And if you want to support my work, check out two things. One is Patreon. If you want to receive credits at the end of the videos, do check that out. And there's a new exclusive process. There's something a little more advanced and very polished, I think. And then also check out my watercolor courses. If you want to learn how to paint with complete freedom, let go, enjoy the painting process, check out my frustration-free watercolor course. Or if you want more realism and achieving a realistic feeling, check out the Watercolor Realism course. Thank you so much for supporting my work, and I will see you in the next vid. Take care.